everybody, my name is Tancha Sumble, and today I just wanted to talk about letting people define you, or should I say not letting people define you. So I've always been unabashed about being an artist, for example. So when you know you're a creative, it's important not to let other people box you in, or at least when somebody does try to box you in language, not to be intimidated too much by that. Maybe you should accept it, but at the same time, it's not necessarily something to really worry about. So yesterday, for example, I was talking to somebody who I would consider an artistic essentialist, whereas I don't really give a crap about definitions when it comes to creativity, because the more you hone in on like the academic aspect of being a creative, it becomes like less and less interesting, and there's like an unnecessary elitism that sort of comes to that. For example, I was asked, like, what's your medium? And I'm like, I don't really have a medium, to be honest with you. It just kind of depends on the day. Like, some days I want to be drawing with a pencil, maybe with some ink. It just kind of depends on how I'm feeling in the moment. Maybe my medium is conversation, and we should engage in more of that. But then the conversation kind of took a turn for the worse, because we ended up discussing the merit of art, like what is good art and what is bad art. And I've never really liked the idea of objectively defining what is good and bad art. Why is that? Well, for example, I'm a very, very big fan of Mark Rothko, for example, but at the same time, I also really like Vincent van Gogh, Da Vinci, Fra Filippo Lippi, all sorts of people, for example. And it just kind of depends on my mood. There's always something about art that I can appreciate, and I think that anybody can really appreciate it, just like a matter of taste. And for somebody to say, like, this is bad art or this is good art, again, the thesis that I always go back to is it's not objectivity, it's just you're expressing your own individuality, and because you have this taste, you want to foist that onto other people, which is fine, I suppose, in conversation. It's always interesting to debate if you want to, but I love the colors in Van Gogh. I like the brushstrokes in Van Gogh. But comparing Van Gogh, for example, to a 1600s Baroque piece by, can't forget the name, Bernini, for example. Bernini was a painter, but he was also a sculptor. I mean, it's not really a comparison that you can make, because they're two entirely different contexts, and depending on my mood, I can enjoy each pretty much equally. And the guy I was talking to is like, oh, well, what do you do for art? You're an artist? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm an artist. I don't know if you've been able to notice, but on my channel, I draw cartoons all the time. And he's like, oh, that's your art? And before I can really explain myself and say that, no, well, I do other things too, he immediately remarked, like, oh, yeah, the anatomy on the hands. I mean, that's just... He didn't say it was bad, but the remark got me thinking, like, wow, some people really do like to create, again, like a hierarchy of what is good and bad art, and I can feel like the judgment from this guy. And right after that, he's like, well, I'm kind of a judgmental person. And I'm like, yeah, clearly. And the thing about like just judgmental people, boxing people into definitions, if you're a creative person, I would suggest stay away from those kinds of folks. They're not helpful to you guys, especially when the critiques that they make of you is not in good faith. And like the creative journey that I've had as an artist has been a little bit difficult, because I did go to art school. I went to school for illustration and graphic design. And one of the things that was difficult for me is I started as a guy just drawing photorealistic portraits of like Kurt Cobain and other celebrities at the time. I was also really into like Muse, so I'd do random portraits of Matthew Bellamy, the vocalist of that band. And it was easy for me to render, but rendering was never the top priority for illustrators. When you're an illustrator, you want to know how to tell a story. In order to tell a story, you need to know perspective, you need to know how to use color, all sorts of things in order to sort of manipulate the world around you so you can create what you want to. And I like the rule, like, know the rules so that you can break them. And so I did, but I was always, surrounded by a multitude of extremely talented artists from around the world. And I saw people who were into abstract art who would use color in a creative way, like influenced by Jackson Pollock. But then there'd be another person who wanted to match the brilliance of 17th century, Dutch painting, for example. And it always amazes me that people find ways to objectify, at least visually speaking, what is and what is not high art. For me, it's as long as it's pure creative expression, That's what matters. And Josh, I don't know if you're watching this, but Josh had this interesting point when it comes to filmmaking, is even if it's not a masterpiece, like when you put something out there, people are going to engage with it, and they're going to have like their own experience, and maybe that experience that they have, regardless of how good the art is to that person, at least it creates like a memory that they'll be able to cherish. Josh is going on about how if you watch a movie, for example, take your favorite movie and then your favorite memories of watching movies. Your favorite memory of watching a movie with somebody else may not actually be your favorite movie, but the person with whom you watch the movie might make the memory a little bit more, what is the right word? Not charitable, but memorable, I suppose. And I think about how this goes for video games as well. Ocarina of Time is a great example of this, where I've played that game many, many times. And one of the reasons I like playing it so much is not necessarily because the game is just a good game in and of itself, but because some of my best memories, about 6 or 7 years ago, were shared with another person who I grew up with, and we used to play that game all the time, making Let's Plays and cracking jokes and doing comedy and humor. And there are still like inside jokes from that playing that game I repeat to myself and repeat to her to this day when we hang out. And it's interesting to think about, because when we engage with art, it's not always about the art itself. I really think it's a personal experience, and how you have that experience will never be shared with anybody else other than maybe if there's another person in the room with you at the time. And I like to go back to those video games to remind myself of a certain period of my life. Now, does that make the game like the best game ever? Does that matter to another person? Probably not. I don't think that they would give a shit if I went on a long rant about why Wind Waker mattered to me, unless I post to my main YouTube channel. But all that said is, when I make art, even though I might not find it a masterpiece, even though it might not be regarded as very good by a large range of people, there still might be that one person who does enjoy it. And that's enough to want to make art. That's enough potential to engage with the creative aspect, the creative process of art in general. And when a person tries to box you in and say that your art is crap, or that you're not good, or that you're not meeting some specific definition, I say ignore that person. They're not worth listening to. I really wanted to get that point hammered in today, because it always bothers me, since there are people out there who are afraid of expressing themselves and calling themselves an artist, when all they need to do is tell themselves, I am an artist. In Game Grumps, actually, Aaron Hansen and Dan Avidan had a really nice bit where they were they weren't making fun of, but they were critiquing people who use the word aspiring. Like, I'm an aspiring artist, I'm an aspiring game designer. It's like, no, you're not. You are a game designer. You are an artist, right here and right now. If you believe in it, nobody else can take that away from you. And that is the most important thing to remember in all of this, because if you don't, then there's all this missed potential that you have, which you will never realize. So don't let anybody else take it away from you, and don't tell yourself that you're not good enough, because you are. I think that all you guys, if you're a lot younger than me, if you're just getting into creative endeavors and want to express yourself, your definition of yourself matters the most, because being an artist is purely subjective. So that's basically all I wanted to talk about today. But hopefully one of you guys goes out into the world today, shares a painting, shares a drawing, shares a piece of music. It doesn't really matter. I believe in all of you. So, cheers.